I'm Angela Willis, and in today's episode of Women That Kill, we look at South African police officer Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu, who was convicted of killing 5 of her family members and a boyfriend. She hired killers she encountered as an officer. The case helps us understand people who kill their family members, also known as family annihilators. Although these types of cases are relatively rare, they are the most common form of mass killings. Between 1900 and 2000, there was 909 victims of mass murder in the United States. Of those, more than half occurred within the immediate family. Rosemary was born in South Africa in 1975. She grew up in a rural area called Bushbuck Ridge. She had a daughter by her then boyfriend. She moved to Johannesburg to find work to send money back to her family. No one in her family, including her sisters, mothers, nephews, had a job. They all lived in poverty. In 2014, Rosemary became the only employed person in her family when she took a job as a police sergeant. Her family was thrilled that she was able to secure a job. However, there was a big problem with this job. The average salary for a police officer in South Africa is about $1,100 a month. That was just enough to support herself and her daughter. But somehow, not only was Rosemary able to send money back to her family, she also had a lot of extra money. Employees at the police station said Rosemary often splurged on her colleagues for lunch without expecting the money back. She talked about how she went gambling at the Emperor's Palace Casino in Kempton Park. Her colleagues were perplexed about how she could afford all of these luxuries. Nevertheless, her co-workers were never suspicious of her. They liked her. She seemed to have a wonderful life. Things started going bad for Rosemary starting in 2012. Rosemary experienced the tragic losses of loved ones. It began when Rosemary's cousin died in March 2012. Over the next 6 years, unidentified suspects killed Rosemary's sister, brother, niece, and 2 nephews. The murders were violent. Rosemary's nephew was hacked to death. His body was dumped at a marketplace in January 2018. Rosemary's boyfriend and the father of her daughter was found butchered to death. Despite the victims being dumped in public places, the police could never solve the crimes. The death of her loved ones devastated Rosemary. She paid for all of their funerals. And despite Rosemary's best efforts at getting the police force to investigate the deaths, all the murders remained unsolved. Finally, the police got a break in 2012 when a hitman came into the police station to report that he had been commissioned to kill an entire family, including a 5-month-old baby. The hitman could not go through with the murders. The police set up a sting operation to capture the person who set up the contract killings. The police secured recording devices onto the hitman and in his car. The hitman met with the client to get more details about killing the family. To the police's shock, the person in the video was Rosemary, and what she said truly disgusted the officers. When Rosemary met with the hitman, she was unaware that she was being recorded. Rosemary went into graphic detail about the planned murders. She wanted the hitman to kill her sister, Joyce, and her sister's 5 young children. On tape, you can hear Rosemary say that she wanted the 6 of them to be burned alive at their home while they were sleeping or strangled. Then, Rosemary actually drove the hitman to her sister's house and gave him a bag of pills and gasoline. The hitman confirmed with Rosemary that she wanted Joyce dead that night at 9 p.m. She even told the hitman why she needed her family murdered. Rosemary wanted to collect the insurance policy she had taken out on Joyce and her kids, saying she needed the money. Rosemary got out of the car and called a taxi. She did not leave immediately. Instead, she waited to see her sister's house on fire before she was going to leave. While she was waiting, the police arrested her and took her to her sister's home. Joyce confirmed that Rosemary was her older sister. Moreover, Joyce confirmed that she had given Rosemary her children's birth certificates and documents to purchase the life insurance policy. Joyce was an unemployed single mother. She had nothing. She thought the life insurance policy would help her children if something happened to her. She gave Rosemary her children's birth certificates to make them the beneficiaries, not to take out accident death policies on the children. The police started to investigate all of Rosemary's murdered relatives. They found that Rosemary had been with most of the victims before their death. She was either the last person to see them alive or the first person that noticed they were missing. The police found the insurance policies for all the murdered family members in her home. Everyone who died had an insurance policy with Rosemary as the beneficiary, except for one. Rosemary's nephew, named Brilliant, who had been stabbed to death and dumped in a market, did not have an insurance policy. Police believe Rosemary killed him because he found out that Rosemary had an insurance policy on his mother, Audrey, who was killed in June 2013. Audrey was poisoned and strangled to death in a room. Rosemary was the last person with Audrey. Because Audrey and Rosemary were sisters who got along well, no one in the family suspected that Rosemary could have harmed Audrey. That is until Brilliant found out that Rosemary received more than $47,000 from a life insurance policy opened in Audrey's name. Investigators believe Rosemary killed her nephew because he knew what she had done and would tell other people about it. Police interviewed the hitman hired to kill Rosemary's sister, Audrey. He stated that Rosemary knew him through her job as a police officer. She asked him to kill her sister, but he refused, and so the hitman instructed Rosemary on how to do it. The police believe Audrey was the only murder Rosemary committed herself, while all the others were contract killing. During the investigation, police found another shocking item. They found insurance policies that were recently purchased just before Rosemary's arrest. They were for the family members she had planned to kill next. Rosemary was planning to kill her 80-year-old mother. Not only was there an insurance policy, but Rosemary had already paid the hitman a deposit of $172. And it gets worse. Rosemary admitted she drove the hitman to her mother's home. Luckily, when the hitman saw the old and vulnerable lady, he felt sorry for her. So he asked her for a cup of water and left the home without killing her. Rosemary's mother remembers the man, but she refuses to believe that her daughter would kill her because they have a great relationship. Over and over, Rosemary's mother said that her daughter loves her and she loves her daughter. The police officially charged Rosemary with 6 counts of murder, insurance fraud, and attempted murder. Before the trial, more charges were added. While she was in jail, Rosemary tried to arrange the killing of the chief investigator officer of her case. She hired a hitman to take him out. As a result, she was moved from a jail in Johannesburg to a maximum security facility in another town. At trial, one thing kept coming up over and over. No one in the family suspected Rosemary. There was no animosity or anger between Rosemary and the family members she targeted to kill. It was the opposite. She killed the family members who she loved and loved her. During the trial, it was revealed from insurance payout records that Rosemary had received almost $100,000 from the death of her relatives. That's the equivalent of 10 years' salary of a police officer in South Africa. When asked what she did with the money, Rosemary could not account for where all the money went. Rosemary had no money, no property, or anything of significant value at her arrest. Witnesses testified that Rosemary had a severe gambling problem. She gambled all the money away. In the end, she had nothing. As the judge noted, she killed all of those who loved her for nothing. Throughout the trial, Rosemary proclaimed her innocence. Once convicted, however, she stated that she was happy the trial was over. After sentencing, Rosemary's happy disposition quickly changed to very threatening. She became angry and threatened everyone in court, saying that although she would be spending Christmas in prison alone, that person, as she pointed to witnesses who testified against her, would be spending next one with her. Eventually, police had to remove her from the court. Criminologists identified the type of serial killer like Rosemary as family annihilators. These are serial killers who kill multiple members of their own families, such as their parents, children, siblings, or spouses, often due to financial or relationship issues. Rosemary had significant financial stressors due to her gambling addiction, coupled with a family who was heavily financially reliant on her. As Rosemary stated during the trial, that she could never go home if she did not have money to give her family. Instead of admitting her financial problems to her family, Rosemary thought her only option was to destroy them. It was easy for her. As an officer, she interacted with the underbelly of society, addicts, criminals, rapists, drunks, and killers. She used these connections to hire the right people to kill her family members. If you want to learn more about women that kill, check out some of my other videos.